Welcome back, everybody. It's Ed Martin. I'm here with Jordan Henry, and we are talking about Life Matters. We're talking how life matters, and rallying the pro-life movement to fulfill its calling is our tagline as we've been gathering and talking. I don't think even Jordan and I expected that we thought we'd have like maybe 10 weeks of run-up before we'd have this much attention on the life issue. It's extraordinary how fast things are happening, how much is going on. So we have a lot to cover. Jordan, any deep thoughts before we start?
Wow, just what an exciting time this has been. Like you said, I mean, I thought that we had a little bit of lead up time before things really got interesting. But no, I mean, it's just getting right into it, which is why we need some experts in our corner to help us figure this stuff out.
Yeah. Well, today we have a great expert and a friend of ours who, for the last few years, in part, I think because his old boss, Senator Chuck Grassley, has been such a favorite of conservatives, and our old friend, Jordan Tammy Kobza, who was a great Eagle leader from Iowa, was close with Senator Grassley. So we did a lot of, when we could, to work with him on policy issues. Mike Davis is a former senior staffer. He worked for the Senate Judiciary Committee when Chuck Grassley was the chairman, and chief counsel there, I guess, for nominations is the title he had. So he was involved in a lot of hearings, I think over 30 markup meetings, which is where you're in the fray, and then floor votes on almost 280 nominees, the way I counted it, including Justice Kavanaugh. That's just when he was working for the committee. Then he went out and he has been the founder and the president of the Article 3 project, which has been really helpful for a lot of us in the last few years, tracking who's been nominated, where they are in the process. It's a bit Byzantine if you don't know what's going on in the Senate and the Judiciary Committee and all. So the Article 3 project has been really helpful. And he himself is a former clerk for both the Court of Appeals, the 10th Circuit, as well as the U.S. Supreme Court. He has helped shepherd nominees through when they're nominated by President Trump. He's worked in the, as I mentioned, in the Congress and the Senate, and of course he clerked. So he's been in all three branches. Mike Davis, welcome, Mike. How are you?
Hey, Ed, how are you doing? Thank you for having me on.
Well, you've been a real great resource for a lot of us, and so thank you for that. And so we're talking about this in the aftermath of this leak on the Supreme Court. First of all, I've talked before. I clerk for the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals, and there's nothing more sort of sacred than your bond with your judge or your justice. In a funny way, sacred maybe a small s, like a sacred in our American government sense. It's almost like you're betraying him or her to do anything that would reflect poorly on him or her, especially when it comes to their thinking. Like they make a decision. They're all big boys and girls. They're used to having criticism. But when it's the back and forth, the inside stuff, I remember hearing my friend from college, now Father Paul Scalia, talk about how his dad and Ruth Bader Ginsburg were such great friends. And they had this real sense that was not something that Justice Scalia said we'd ever talk about. This is there's a part of the whole court that's different. And as a clerk, leaking something is just insane. So how do you respond as a former clerk?
Well, it's unprecedented, Ed. As you know, there has never been a draft opinion leaked from the Supreme Court before the opinion was released by the court. Back with Roe versus Wade, the results of the decision leaked out to Time magazine, I believe, and the Chief Justice at the time threatened to investigate and polygraph all of the law clerks, and then one of the law clerks fessed up that they were the person who did it. But no, this is an unprecedented leak, and it causes a great deal of damage to the court because the court has 9 justices. Each of the justices has 4 law clerks, and they have to collaborate in order to work on majority opinions, concurring opinions, dissenting opinions. They have to share these drafts over a several-week period in order to get out a final product. And if there is no trust, if there's no secrecy, if there's no confidence in that process, it really hurts the institution. And maybe that was the intended result of this leak.
Well, I've actually said that. I thought that, for decades, the left loved the idea of a sacred court whose judgment we must revere, whether Roe v. Wade or Obergefell or anything else. And it was nice to have a Justice Scalia as long as he was in the minority. But now that there's a Justice Thomas and others in a conservative majority, diminishing the institution seems to be maybe a preference of the left. But we're talking here with Mike Davis, the founder and president of the Article 3 project. Mike, backing up for a second, from the Supreme Court leak standpoint, what happens now? I know Chief Justice Roberts came out with a statement the next day, and he said, yes, this was a draft opinion of Alito. Yes, it was leaked inappropriately. we're going to get to the bottom of this. We have our own law enforcement to do that, which is the U.S. the Marshals, right? Tell us what that means. What is there really? I mean, they're not doing busts. They're not going out and busting up things. They're mostly a security detail, I think. How is it going to work out to get to the bottom of this?
I actually think the Chief Justice did the right thing here in announcing that the Marshal of the Supreme Court, an officer of the Supreme Court, would handle this. And I'll tell you for a couple reasons. Number one is you don't want the political branches sticking their noses into the internal operations of the Supreme Court. You don't want Congress, my former stomping ground like the Senate Judiciary Committee. You don't want the FBI. You don't want the Biden Justice Department with Attorney General Merrick Garland, who has proven to be a partisan hack. You want this to be handled as an internal investigation, and with the Marshal of the Supreme Court leading a 200-person Supreme Court police force. If they need additional help from the U.S. Marshal Service and the Justice Department, they can ask them to come in and deputize them to do the polygraphs or do the subpoenas or whatever. But this needs to be led by the Supreme Court as an internal investigation. There's that piece. The separate piece about threats to the Supreme Court justices at their homes, that's absolutely where the Biden Justice Department, where Attorney General Merrick Garland, Deputy Attorney General Lisa Monaco, the FBI Director Chris Wray, the U.S. attorneys in D.C., Maryland, and the Eastern District of Virginia have absolutely fallen down on the job, dereliction of duty, by not protecting Supreme Court justices from and their families from threats because of their pending case before them.
Mike, back for 1 second to the court. The Marshal's been tasked to get to the bottom of this. I think you said on another interview, I heard you interviewed, that the universe of people who could leak this is clearly finite. And it's actually not 1,000 people, right? I mean, unless there was a hack, and I think that's not, no one has alleged that could be, I guess, that the universe of people that could do this is 100, 200 people?
It's about 80 people, and it's probably even less than that. It's probably a law clerk, just because if you look at the Politico story, not only did they leak a draft hard copy version of the February early version of the draft Alito opinion, they also provided Politico insight into the deliberations of the Supreme Court that only a very limited number of people would have known, and it would have been a law clerk.
So if you get to the bottom of it, it's not a whistleblower. Nobody said that this is a leak to alleged wrongdoing. It's a leak in terms of the inner workings. What's the remedy?
Well, this fake whistleblower would be a felon, because you're looking at if the Marshal of the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court police find out who did this, and they learn the reason why they did this, you're talking about a criminal referral to the U.S. Attorney's Office in D.C. for potential destruction, theft, misuse of government property, maybe even obstruction of justice, if you're leaking this for the purposes of trying to change a justice's vote on a pending case.
That's really interesting, Mike. But it seems to me like nobody on the left is, of course, concerned at all about the integrity of the Supreme Court right now. They're focusing on abortion and that side of this whole thing. Are you aware of anybody on the left, any Democrat at all, who has actually come out and condemned the leak itself? I'm not sure that I know of any that have done that.
I've only heard Democrats praise the leaker, so no, I'm not aware of that at all. And frankly, as Ed and you have both discussed, this is the first time we finally, for the first time in 90 years, have a constitutionalist majority on the Supreme Court. 5 justices who will actually follow the law instead of make up the law. President Trump switched the 5-4 liberal court to the 5-4 Clarence Thomas court, and so now the Democrats, now the left, want to burn the place down.
Yeah. Mike, I'm sorry to go back to it again. I know you were careful when we prepared for this podcast. And again, it's Ed Martin and Jordan Henry. We're talking Life Matters with Mike Davis, the founder and president of Article 3 Project. You were very careful to warn me and to say, hey, you have not been in touch with people. You've stayed away from your former colleagues, anything that works with the court, all this, because you're just being careful and wise, I think. But do you have, I've heard you say publicly, because of what's happened, they probably should figure out what the decision is if there's dissents or whatever, and get the decision out, because we're just setting up a situation. I think, if I can summarize your assessment, that you're just going to have weeks of pressure and questions and all, and frankly confusion. In terms of a timeline, usually the most sort of controversial decision, meaning the most attention, would be published on June 30th, maybe July 1st this year. Now we have a leaker. We have a more controversial decision because of the public. Do you have a sense of the timeline? I mean, will they get to the bottom of the leaker I know you're guessing, but in 2 weeks? Do they know already? How could they not know already?
It shouldn't be that hard to figure out who the leaker is. I think the first step that the marshal needs to do is just sit every court employee who would have access to this draft opinion, including the law clerks, especially the law clerks, and sit them down and get them to talk to the Supreme Court police or other investigators under 18 U.S.C. 1001 minimally, where you would go to prison as a felon if you lied to federal investigators, or at least if you're a Trump supporter or a Republican, you would go to prison if you lied to federal investigators. Maybe not this leaker. They might get their own show on MSNBC. Who knows? But it shouldn't be that hard to get to the bottom of this. You interview these people. If you can't figure it out from the interviews, then you subpoena their emails and phone records. If you can't figure it out from that, then you sit them down for polygraphs.
Well, with remote broadcasting the way it is nowadays, they might be able to have their own MSNBC show from prison. Who knows?
Yeah. Don't encourage them now, Jordan. All right, Mike. But now back to my second part of my convoluted question. Mike Davis is who we're talking to. What do you think on the decision now? I mean, I know you've said get it out because you're just causing more strife, but they haven't gotten it out. They didn't send it. They didn't publish it the next day. So what do you think? Do they wait until June 30th?
No. I mean, it looks pretty clear from oral argument that there are at least 5 justices who are going to overturn Roe versus Wade. That's especially clear since the draft opinion of the court by Justice Alito means there would be 5 justices to go along with it, or at least that's what there were at the conference after the case was argued, and the case was assigned to Justice Alito to draft the majority opinion. And a majority opinion that the Chief Justice or the Supreme Court has authenticated. So they need to understand that the longer this waits, the more these Supreme Court justices and their families are in danger. People are radical. They're crazy. There's a lot of money on the line with the abortion industry. The abortion industry makes their money killing kids, and they give that money to Democrat politicians and Democrat causes.
Article3project.org, the number 3project.org to see more of Mike's work and track appointments. There's a lot happening. One distinction, if I can say, just practical matter, when you look at the leak itself, and don't even look at the decision, except to say that the flow, Mike, is there is the arguments in late in 2021. There's a conference soon after where they vote. It's clear, at least the way it played out now. There was leaks back then, I think, a little bit, that it's 5-4 to overturn Roe. It looks like Alito's draft opinion, which is from February, it might have changed. If there wasn't a leak, someone might have said, "Oh, I would have liked this." But if they didn't change, if he didn't want to change it, they could have published this as a 5-4 opinion, and there could have been a concurrence of someone clarifying something they wanted to. In other words, the holding is probably where it is after the conference, right?
Yeah, I mean, they could absolutely issue their ruling now, including a per curiam opinion saying this is how we rule with opinions to follow. And there's precedent for that happening. I think it happened back in like 1954 on a case. They could say, look, here's what we're ruling, that, Roe versus Wade and Casey are overturned, and we're going to uphold the state abortion restriction, and we're going to have written opinions to follow. Maybe you get out the Alito opinion now, and as the liberals are kicking and screaming and crying and dragging their feet, they could just issue their opinion later.
Mm-hmm. With this being such a divisive thing, and really only one side talking about this issue right now, what would you say the court can do to restore the faith that the American people have previously had in it? What needs to happen for us to trust the Supreme Court again after this leak?
Well, I would say that this is the first time that a leak like this has ever happened. I don't think it's ever going to happen again. I think it's a rogue clerk who's done this. And I don't think the Supreme Court needs to change anything. They can't. I mean, they're not going to send their justices and their law clerks and administrative aides into a skiff in order to circulate drafts among the chambers. They have to be able to collaborate and circulate drafts. You have a bad actor here. And maybe that bad actor left long ago. Maybe that bad actor left right after this opinion circulated in February, and that's why we haven't seen later drafts. Maybe it's a law clerk who wanted to issue this draft opinion either to influence a waffling justice or to just say hell with it and burn down the court. I'm not sure, but I don't think the court needs to do anything differently.
Mike Davis, one last sort of line of questions, comments. For those that are you've watched and you've been a part of, say Kavanaugh's confirmation hearings, where the narrative is cruising along in terms of qualifications and record as a judge, and then whammo, Michael Avenatti and that woman, they come in, and you watch the media try to spin something that's not there into something that's there, and you watch it with some success, right? I mean, this is the damage that they've done to people and to things. In this case, you're watching the media say things about this decision like, oh, nobody wants to make abortion illegal. Again, from the standpoint of someone who's worked at the Supreme Court, clerked at the Court of Appeals, observes this stuff, if this decision stands, there's nothing in the decision that bans abortion, right?
No, it's we're going to change this idea that there's this federal judicial supremacy, this federal judicial preemption, where we're going to coddle the abortion industry and just make up this Supreme Court law that doesn't exist in the Constitution to coddle the abortion industry. What's going to happen is when Roe versus Wade and Casey are overturned, abortion is going to go back to being decided by the states, which is what happened for the first 200 years before 49 years ago when the Supreme Court just made up Roe versus Wade.
We're talking Life Matters. It's Ed Martin and Jordan Henry. We're talking with Mike Davis, the founder and president of the Article 3 Project, article3project.org. You can see a lot there. The tracker on appointments and things. This is very helpful. But next week on our podcast, we're going to talk with Clark Forsyth, who the attorney who wrote a book called Abuse of Discretion. And he looked back at the memos from the Roe v. Wade decision. And the clerks were going back and forth, basically explaining how they were. The clerk was telling his justice how he's going to come up with these ideas on viability and all this. And I guess one thing here, Mike, it's impossible to do the job without clerks, but I do think it's surprising to people how powerful these clerks are, right? I mean, you're talking about the 9 most influential judges in the country, and the 4 people that work for them, 36 people, have, influence, at least the way this worked out, on world events.
Yeah, I mean, very much so. I mean, with Justice Gorsuch and his 4 law clerks, we didn't have a lot of power because he rewrote every word that we gave him. But
Right.
There are some justices who would just, say that this is what I want and rubber stamp it.
Yeah, it's well, again, I mean, you talk about this sort of the crisis-driven media, big tech and media, where we're suddenly going to have. I can't imagine what's going to happen when we find out who the leaker was and how the media will try to make he or she into a hero. I can see it coming already. That this is probably he or she will get a job at Yale Law School the way it's going. Mike, anything we're missing that we're in terms of our listeners are folks in the pro-life movement who are sort of trying to figure out how to keep working towards good things in the future. Anything you wanted to add?
I would just say give the Supreme Court breathing room and time to get to the bottom of this. They will. This is an internal investigation. They'll get to the bottom of this. I would also say on the threats against the Supreme Court justices at their homes, it's inexcusable. This dereliction of duty from the Attorney General Merrick Garland and the Biden administration, they must start making arrests. When people are threatening Supreme Court justices or any federal judge at their homes, it is very dangerous. We saw this with Judge Solis, a district court judge in New Jersey, whose 20-year-old son was killed in 2020 at their home, and her husband was shot several times and has had to undergo many surgeries. It is very dangerous to dox federal judges, and they need to step up. They need to protect them, and they need to prosecute people who are violating the obstruction of justice and other laws by threatening justices and their families at their homes.
All right. Hey, thanks, Mike. As always, Mike Davis, the founder and president of the Article 3 Project. On Twitter, he is at MRDDIA. By the way, Mike, explain that. What does that mean? Why is it at MRDDIA?
It's MRDDMIA, MRDDMIA, and that's my initials in Des Moines, Iowa, where I'm from. I know I sound like I'm from the Bronx, but I'm from Des Moines.
MRDDMIA. All right. I've always wondered. You're like at Julie Kelly comes on at Julie_Kelly 2. I'm like, come on, you guys, get something that's a little catchier. But anyway, you follow him on Twitter. There's a lot there on Twitter. Go ahead. What, Mike?
We have common names, Julie Kelly, Mike Davis. We have to come up with these weird Twitter handles.
I know, it's a code. It's like I cracked the code, the Da Vinci Code. What's his name? Brown will do a book on what Mike Davis's Twitter handle means. Now we solved it. All right. Article3project.org. Article, the number 3project.org. Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it.